This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Breaking news. Fake non-binos, allegedly, infiltrating our police force. This is a story in The Age.
Even they, thems.
Even they, thems.
Yes.
Yeah, officer they, them. 7 police interviewed. Yeah. Would they please stop assaulting me just for participating in protests? Would they please not shoot any more unarmed Indigenous people? Now, 7 police interviewed, station rated over false, that's in quotation marks, non-binary claims. The Age says the Victoria police officers have searched the force's Frankston station and interviewed several officers accused of claiming to be non-binary to fraudulently claim more money for civilian clothing allowances. The Chief Commissioner announced a probe into the issue in July after reports that some male officers had been rorting a discrepancy in the force's clothing allowance by identifying as non-binary. Because under the scheme, female officers are entitled to claim about $1,300 more than male colleagues. So I assume maybe they just get the $1,300 extra because women's clothing is more expensive, women's civvy clothing.
But what, is this civilian clothing, or don't they just get uniforms?
I think it's
How the fuck does this work?
It says, I swear I saw somewhere, more money for civilian clothing allowances. Because, you know, when they get...
They have a wage.
Because
we're
when they get their...
fucking close out of our wages. Defund the police.
Yes, that's true.
Defund the police.
That's true. Whoa, wait. But I thought they meant when they're undercover. When they're at the protest and you're like, that looks like definitely one of my comrades. They're standing there in a baseball cap. They need to get a big floppy hat if they're a woman or non-binary, and it costs more.
Newspapers with the holes cut out of the eyes. It's really expensive stuff.
Cozzie lives. And that's my question. It's like, is this culture war or Cozzie lives? That should be a segment on this show, by the way. Culture war or Cozzie lives?
Right. Well, look, I am positive there's a few Frankston police officers having a little bit of a laugh and getting some sweet coin out of it. And, hey, good luck for them exposing themselves as the fucking crooks and fraudsters and assholes that police are. Now, I'm not a police officer. I just play one on TV, okay? And all my costumes were provided by the good people at Amazon Studios and their costume department, and I appreciate that. And we had a very inclusive workspace, lots of they, thems, left, right, and centre, heaps of fucking lesbians. It was a grand old time. So, look, I get it. You know, I can relate.
You get it. That's great. Good ad for Amazon there. Shitty fucking company. But like, I mean, I guess the concern is that this really it gives fuel to the fire of claims that like non-binary people are not real. Non-binary people are very real. It's just that these cops are fucking shitheads because all cops are bastards. So hope that helps to explain if anyone was confused about the message from this story.
We're used to the Greens pushing economic illiterate ideas.
Well, I've been negotiating and talking with First Ministers, not with minor parties.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Hey everyone, it's Serious Danger, podcast about Greens politics in Australia. Thank you so much for getting it. As featured on Media Watch. If you've tuned into Media Watch this week and have been hooked and confronted to join the Serious Danger family, welcome. You are now a Danger Dog. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. I am a member of the Greens. Emerald Moon is a member of the Greens.
You'll be disappointed to learn if you watched the Media Watch podcast. It's not Tom's podcast to start, but it's also not an official Greens Party podcast. Fucking dogs.
Raising women. Love to see it. It is made possible with the help of the Green Institute and produced by Michael Griffin. This week, we are taking a look at what National Cabinet is serving up for renters with their big announcement this week. Spoiler alert. Not much.
Hope you're hungry.
If anything.
For nothing.
We reflect, of course, on the big game, the massive story that dominated the news this week, and the state of women's sport and all the politics involved in the Tillies. We've got new patrons on board. Thank you to Alec, Brian, Frankie, Ali, Camille, Braden, Jet, and Dylan. Frankie sent us a message specifically. Joined to hear you rip apart friendly Geordies, staying for solid takes. I know Tom mostly from the Bugle, enjoying the funny leftist takes for Aussie politics. Thanks, Frankie.
Thanks, Frankie.
If you're a Patreon, of course, you get bonus content. A reminder that the latest Patreon episode is my conversation with Lee Rhiannon, former Greens New South Wales Senator, lifelong activist, very cool lady, the daughter of communists. We talk about Palestine, we talk about India, what she makes of the current state of the Australian Greens and Ozpol generally. Really interesting conversation, and it was great to have time with Lee. If you sign up to become a patron, you'll get to listen to that. And the full back catalogue with everyone from fucking Will Anderson to a million different chats about various interesting topics. We talk about trees with Bob Brown. Oh, you'll have a great time.
Here she is on Tom Ballard's podcast Serious Danger last year, which is
This is a podcast about green politics in Australia,
where she is introduced as the
former National Greens Secretary.
Christine O'Connell has been heavily involved with the Greens for years, as a volunteer since 2015, and as Deputy and then National Greens Secretary from 2017. Christine told Media Watch she left that role in 2018 and hasn't been a member of the party for 18 months, although this profile about her time as National Secretary is still featured on the Greens website. So, why didn't 10 News disclose to viewers that the renter featured in their story, which is all about how
the Greens claim a rent freeze could have saved tenants billions,
is a spokesperson for the Anti-Poverty Centre who has spent years campaigning for the Greens. 10 told us
10 News First was not made aware that she used to have links to the Greens.
Christine O'Connell has every right to argue her case, and we're not discrediting her views, but the media has a responsibility to tell viewers which team she's batting for. You can read full statements from her and Channel 10 on our website.
What do you think our next target should be? We've made it to Friendly Geordies. We've made it to Media Watch. What's next?
Oh, my God. CNN.
CNN. Yep, okay, good goal.
I got a text from my mum, just, hey, you were just on Media Watch. Terrifying text to receive. Without
that is not what you want to
context.
receive. That's awful.
Just about someone you interviewed on your podcast. And I said, uh-oh, Jesse Noakes, the climate activist, what the fuck, are we in trouble?
Yeah.
And she didn't, my mum takes a while to reply to text, so I was freaking out. No trouble. It was a story about Kristen McLaren, interviewed as a renter but not disclosing your activism and previous links with the Greens. You had cute curly hair.
Aww. I like that. That's so sweet. Cousin McLaren, a.k.a. Kristen O'Connell. I like that she just went with vaguely like Irish-sounding last name or something.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Yeah. And they were mad because, was it a Channel 7 interview with Kristen?
Channel 10.
Channel 10, sorry. That interviewed her as a renter on the DSP, just about her experience and the state of things. But they didn't mention in the show that she works with the Anti-Poverty Centre, is an anti-poverty, advocate, and or that she had previously been National Secretary of the Greens. How long ago? Like
2018, I think.
2018. 6 years, 5 years ago. Yeah. Which I'm like, okay, first of all, I mean, my take is I just think I think the idea that she shouldn't be doing that kind of interview because she does that regularly. Like there's a bit in the piece in Media Watch where they say something like, she's no stranger to these interviews. In fact, here's her in the ABC on this story. Here's her in blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, because she's an advocate. Like she's a campaigner fighting for herself and people like her, which is like very valid, and we absolutely need people who can do that. But there's like there is this weird like fetishistic, I don't know, like the way that the media tend to use poor people in like case studies, and they just want to use up someone that'll be good for their story without actually seeing them as like a person who might have autonomy and the desire to fight for themselves.
To advocate. But yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, look, solidarity, love to Kristen. I mean, regardless of the Media Watch's role in media criticism in this country, just being at the centre of that would be pretty shitty and overwhelming and annoying. And we love Kristen and appreciate her being on our show and hope she's okay. That's for sure. I think Media Watch's general position was that Channel 10 should have disclosed this fact. And really their target was Channel 10. And in fact, during this story, Media Watch said, we're not saying that Kristen is entitled to her views or she should advocate for this, but viewers have a right to know about relative information that lets you know who this person was. And I do think it is pretty shitty journalism from Channel 10 to just not at least know or acknowledge the fact that she's part of the Anti-Poverty Centre and is an active person who campaigns for stuff.
What about the Greens connection, though? Like, do you think that's still relevant, that she had a volunteer position 5 years ago and is no longer a member?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is pretty dodgy. I mean, more recently, she did publicly work on Sylvie's campaign for the Greens in Sydney as well, so that is slightly more relevant. But, I mean, the Channel 10 responded by saying, we had no idea she had any links to the Greens.
Well,
so that's
you're
just,
an idiot,
again,
then.
just shitty journalism from Channel 10. I think, the greater critique is really, is this the most important media story for Media Watch to be focusing on in this debate, for God's sakes? And Dee Madigan, of course, who's a massive Labor hack and advocates the Labor Party all the time, was taking a lot of glee in this, as this is some fantastic win for the champion of the, a great victory for the people or something. Whereas lots of other people pointed out that, she herself and her advertising outfit has lobbied for Airbnb previously. So she might have a few little issues involved in a few horses in the race there. As a few other people pointed out too, we talked about a piece in The Age a couple of weeks ago, which featured an exclusive interview with the landlord and her position as a committee member of the Australian Landlords Association was not initially disclosed in the article, and then eventually they corrected it and said, oh, sorry, it is relevant that she's actually in the Landlords Association, so that's important.
Media Watch, you're so quiet, you're not saying anything, Media Watch.
Again, I hope you're okay, Kristen.
Yeah.
And more importantly, my hair was curly and cute and my mum liked it.
According to your mum. And that's what matters, eh?
The Greens have showed their true colours. The minor party is green by name and by nature. The Greens have introduced the first bill to legalise cannabis on a national scale. And look, it's a little bit wacky and it's out there and it's never going to go anywhere. But, cannabis is an industry. Medicinal cannabis, CBH and things like that. It is an interesting topic to discuss.
It is like you say, it's like the green dream. The problem, let me just unpack this in a couple of ways. First of all, medicinal cannabis, as we know, I'm not taking any, promise you, as we know, is different in that it does not have the addictive strain. This is what the Greens are about. They are about just this absolutely reckless disregard for anything that sort of looks like structure and, adherence to law.
Well, the biggest story this week, apart from Annabelle Crabb's kitchen cabinet back on the screens, is, of course, the other cabinet, National Cabinet, meeting in Brisbane this week. National Cabinet.
Which one's worse, would you say?
Which one's worse? Well, I don't know. I did read the analysis of Annabelle Crabb's kitchen cabinet show and why politicians, they're just like us, including Peter Dutton, in the ABC. So that was a really good read. But just not as riveting as the media release that came out from the Prime Minister's office following the meeting of National Cabinet this week, I must say. National Cabinet, as I would imagine a lot of our listeners know, but it is the heads of all the states and territories. It's all the first ministers, I guess. So it's the Prime Minister plus all the premiers, etc. They meet and talk about stuff that they can coordinate on and agree on and, things they can do together for national consistency, etc. It is confusing that they would do this because my understanding, Tom, was that the Prime Minister, why would he bother to kind of talk to the heads of states and territories when he has absolutely no control over what they do?
Yeah. No, it can't do anything, and the Greens are ridiculous to call on the federal government to do anything about housing or rents because, of course, that's all states and territories' responsibility. But the states and territories and the federal government are getting together in National Cabinet to discuss better rights for renters and stuff, but they can't do anything about it. So it is weird. Well,
the Greens are just stupid. But in fact, they did get together to announce, quote, the most significant reforms to housing policy in a generation.
Holy shit.
Yeah, according to Albanese on Twitter. I mean, and I saw, God, now I can't even remember who retweeted it, but was like, the sad thing is that this is probably true. They probably are the most significant reforms to housing policy in a generation. And yet, as we will find out, they're pretty dog shit.
What do you define as a generation? Is that, I guess I should know this, having kind of written a book on this, but they're about 15-year stretches. Like the millennials are made up of people born between the 15-year period.
Is it 15 years? That doesn't make sense because don't most people have kids older than 15? How's that work?
No, I don't know. Take it up with the ABS.
I guess it's intentionally vague, perhaps. Some might say.
Well, some of the biggest changes to housing recently, like probably the most massive housing, was the deregulation of the financial sector in the 1980s under the Hawke and Keating government, which led us to the absolute neoliberalised shit show that we suffer under today with the housing crisis that we have.
Different generation, though. I would say that is a different generation for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. This all ties in with the debate on the Housing Australia Future Fund bill, Australian politics' favourite soap opera, which the Greens delayed a vote on a few months ago because they said, we know that National Cabinet is going to be meeting between August and October, and so we want to delay a vote on this bill until they've met and done something the fuck about skyrocketing rents, please. So that's just a reminder as well that, they delayed the vote. They deferred the vote for that specific purpose. They haven't blocked the bill. But anyway, they've had this meeting. We awaited the announcements with bated breath. Unfortunately, no rent freeze and, in fact, no limits on the amount by which your rent can increase. The number one thing that we've been calling for, pretty shitty, hey? Did you think they were going to do something, Tom?
Well, I guess my level of hope was only the idea that some states were going into, or at least made some noises about movement on things. So we heard from Victoria saying that there was the discussion of potential rent caps. Was kind of part of the conversation. So everyone was saying, "Oh no, state wants a rent freeze," but Victoria might be talking about a rent cap. So you had that kind of noise going in there into the National Cabinet. But I guess, certainly over the recent weeks, the hardening of the position, and as we've discussed before on this podcast, this is not just a policy debate. There is a political reality here, an existential threat towards the Labor Party's existence that means they cannot allow to give too much ground to the Greens, even though we're cool and correct.
And even though it would be cool and correct to maybe stop people who are one rent increase away from homelessness from being turfed out into fucking sleeping rough or couch surfing. That would be really cool. But, okay, so I thought we'll just run through really, really quickly. They came out with a list of things that they have agreed among the states and territories in relation to housing. And we'll dig into some of the more juicy stuff around renters' rights after this. The first thing that they agreed was just that when their Help to Buy scheme will start. So I saw they announced this as, we've got this Help to Buy scheme where 40,000 low to middle income buyers will get access to an equity contribution from the federal government. They will contribute up to 40% for new homes, 30% for existing homes. And they had been kind of vague on when that would start. They'd actually already announced this during the federal election. In fact, we discussed it on this podcast. But they're saying it'll start in 2024. States and territories just need to pass legislation to allow it to happen. And everyone agreed and held hands and went, yes, we're going to do this. I mean, the problem with this scheme, as I believe the Greens' Adam Bandt came out and said that I think he said something like, it shouldn't be called the Help to Buy scheme. It should be called the Hard to Get scheme because it's going to be so hard to get. I suppose there are very strict eligibility requirements and there's only 40,000, which is, pretty tiny over in the scheme of things. So, I mean, shared ownership is an interesting thing though, because we had that as part of, the Greens had a shared ownership proposal in our housing plan that we brought to the federal election. You might remember we said 125,000 of our, 1 million social and affordable homes should be homes that first home buyers can live in and own up to 75% equity of for $300,000. So a very big difference in the kind of price cap or the gap in the way that, the amount that our first home buyers would be spending. I think it can get up to $950,000 in Sydney for the homes that we're talking about for Labor's proposal. And then for ours, if you want to get out of it, you shall sell your share back to the Federal Housing Trust. But it's a hard one to explain. I feel as though it's a great idea and I think people like it when they hear it. But it is hard to say to people in a really quick, I guess, communication, this idea of a shared ownership scheme. I think it's quite foreign to a lot of people.
Does it receive the same critiques as like first home buyers schemes and grants and stuff? Like, wouldn't people just argue that this does kind of just push up the price of housing?
Yeah, but that's what I didn't understand. Like, I wonder if there is a response to that in the Greens proposal, and whether, like, how they keep the price low, where they get the $300,000 from. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if it relates to some sort of difference in the policy that I'd have to go and refresh my memory on. That's like how publicly versus privately owned it is. Yeah, I'm not actually too sure, but I agree. Like, it could potentially just be kind of inflationary.
And this is the one that the coalition, Morrison was like, Albanese wants to sit around your kitchen table, right? Or that.
I don't remember that.
He wants to own your home too, kind of thing. Like,
yeah, I mean, he owns enough. Anyway, that was the first thing. They're like, this is so great. We're doing the thing that we said we would do next year if the states and territories do it. The second thing, 1.2 million new homes over 5 years from 2024. Isn't that incredible, Tom?
I don't know.
I don't think so. Many homes. 1.2 million. I don't know if you heard that number. It's really big.
That is a big number. Yeah, that's true.
It's a big number. What does it mean? Not much. Not much at all. So this is just it's fucking fake. Honestly, it means nothing. It is literally it is the states and territories saying across Australia, you know what would be a nice number of homes to be built by someone from between 2024 and 2029? About 1.2 million. That would be really nice.
That'd be pretty good. So we previously heard about building 1 million homes. Like, that is a number that people might have heard before. And they just added 200,000. The federal government said building 1 million homes. And what they mean by that is that in Australia, 1 million homes would be built somewhere, somehow. Not the government owning and building 1 million homes or anything like that, but just through the private sector and through the general business of Australia, 1 million homes would be built over that 5-year period. No discussion as to who owns the homes at the end of it, how much it costs to live in those homes, whether they're affordable or where they live or where they're positioned. Is that right? It's just like 1 million homes total.
Not specifically. There is, and we'll kind of get into this, like, there's vague kind of posturing around how that might happen, which revolves largely around loosening planning laws so that developers can build more, and a particular focus on urban development. So rather than, urban sprawl, whatever, rather than like opening up those big kind of developments outside of the city and in the suburbs, it's more about increasing density in the city. The thing with they previously had said 1 million homes. We all agree. Do we all think it would be nice to build 1 million homes? Do you agree? Yeah. New South Wales, Labor, agree? Yes, yep. But now they said, how about what if we did 200,000 more? Do you agree that also would be good? And they're like, yep. Do you? Hands up. Hands up. Who thinks that wouldn't be good if we had 200,000 extra homes? No one? All right. Agreed by consensus. Thank you. And they said, and plus, if you build...
Point of order. What about 1.4 million? I think that would be even
would that
better.
Be good?
Actually,
and then someone was like, no, that would be too many. That would be too many. Too many homes. No, absolutely not. The 200,000 extra homes as well, what's special about these ones is that if a state and territory does smash their target, like if they're building more above what they would be expected to build for that 1 million homes target from 2028, they will get money from the federal government. The federal government has put a $3 billion new home bonus on the table for states and territories that smash their targets and their goals.
So the federal government can provide incentives to the states to do things on housing.
That's what I was going to ask you about this, Tom. I was going to ask what you thought about this.
Is that something they can do, is it? That's interesting.
It is actually something they could do. In fact, they're doing it with that. They're saying if you build more homes, we'll reward you by giving you a payment after you've built the homes, not to allow you to build the homes, but afterwards we will give you about $15,000 for each new home that you build over the 1 million. Up to our new stretch goal, as they're calling it, of 1.2 million homes. They're also saying that they are putting $500 million on the table for local and state government grants through a competitive process. If local and state governments do things that basically make it easier for homes to be built, like, building essential services or infrastructure in a community that would then make it easier effectively for developers to put new homes there. So yes, just some incentives for the states to do things. It's so interesting.
Great.
So yeah, as I said, the main way that they're saying we need to increase supply, it's all about supply, to tackle the housing crisis, build our 1.2 million homes, is by changing our planning system. So they also, at National Cabinet, agreed to the National Planning Reform Blueprint, which is effectively updating state and territory regional plans to account for these new targets. Again, just aspirational things in plans that each of the states and territories have, where they say, we would like this many homes, please. Like, I think we spoke about this on the show recently. Queensland did this. And then it's stuff like, we all agree that we'll maybe do some zoning changes and some land releases to increase density. And we will, quote, streamline approval pathways and reduce, I think they say something like reducing the lengths of time that it takes for developments to be approved. All things that it's like, it's pretty easy for developers, if they are wealthy and powerful enough, to just get whatever the fuck they want as it is. But we need to make it even easier for them, because that's going to solve the housing crisis. And in fact, I think they're even saying they're talking about strengthening call-in powers, which is the state government can call in a decision that a local government has made if they disagree with it.
Right.
And effectively saying that, yeah, state governments could come in over the top of local councils that refuse to approve developments. So we finally, this is Labor, I guess, NIMBY-proofing the nation, hey?
I mean, look, we need to do a big old deep dive on the state of NIMBYism. I think that you and I have some pretty nuanced takes on this, and we're probably
Very
not
new.
fully...
I have really smart takes on it.
Yeah, we're really smart. We'll get to that later.
And funny, actually, as well. But yeah, we'll get later. Like one day we'll have to, because we can't fit them all here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in the course of being a public green defender, of course, you get charged of NIMBYism all the time. I see stories relating to NIMBYs that I do think are ridiculous, and I think that the balances to address the housing crisis, some considerations win out over some environmental concerns and some local character bullshit and heritage, which is often just rich people saying that we don't want a certain kind of people or a certain kind of house being built near us. And I do think that sucks. So planning, regulations, there probably is some room to move. I think, in some inner cities, the height restriction stuff you do hear about are pretty ridiculous. And so that could well be changed. Something I did come across when researching the book was like remembering if you change zoning regulations, you also increase the value of the land. Like if you can build more houses on a block of land, then that makes that land far more valuable, which then bumps up house prices across the board, which also bumps up house prices across the board.
Yeah, which
so
is
it's
why...
always, if these reforms are never doing anything about reducing the house of pricing, then you should view them pretty skeptically, I think.
Exactly. It's exactly the same thing that you're talking about, that the policies that the major parties propose to, quote, address the housing crisis almost always drive inflation in the fucking housing market. Like negative gearing, first home buyer grants, whatever it is, loosening planning laws are all part of a system that incentivizes speculation.
Yes.
And that drives up that is inflationary, and it'll drive up costs.
They will say this. They will say this explicitly. Jason Clare, as housing minister before the election, no one wants house prices to come down. That'd be terrible. Everyone's house prices need to go up. We need constantly to just balloon, is constantly boost up the house price again and again and again. That's just good economics,
Yeah. I mean, the upzoning thing, when you upzone a property, that is very good for developers who have land banked a bunch of land, because then suddenly they've got these windfall profits, which is why the Greens have proposed a, windfall profits tax in a lot of states. I know that's something that the Greens in Queensland at least have talked about for a long time, that you tax those that, upzoned value of the land. And then you might use that to pay for, public infrastructure. Might be nice. But I hate that the NIMBY discourse has made me even be like, oh, do I need to defend NIMBYs? Because it's like, no, NIMBYism obviously is shit. But it's like, quote unquote, YIMBYs. The YIMBYs that I see are fucking loser idiots who are just like sucking developer dick and think that is going to solve the housing crisis, when we just know that it's absolutely not. Even though, there are lots of ways that you could increase the diversity, the mix, the density of housing options, particularly, in the city, that make the city, a better place to live, makes greater neighborhoods, make them livable, and increase housing supply. Just, not forgetting again, though, the fact that, like, we have all these fucking empty homes because, again, developers are incentivized to just leave them fucking empty.
Yeah.
And, of course, the fundamental issue with this kind of answer, that you just loosen up planning regulations, you get private developers to build more homes, and that will bring down prices because supply and demand, etc., hasn't worked that way. No evidence that it has worked that way. We've tried that. It's fucking failed.
Yeah.
And yet there is nothing like, this isn't about delivering affordable homes. It's just about delivering homes. And in fact, a lot of those high density developments, the high rises, are fucking luxury apartments. They're so expensive, and they're not suitable for the kind of people that actually need homes right now. So the agreements that National Cabinet came to this week, they kind of pay lip service to this. They say that states and territories will look at, quote, reforms to support the rapid delivery of social and affordable housing. And they say...
No, I'm sorry, affordable housing, is that just market rates?
Well, that's right. I guess that's what it could mean. So, fuck me anyway. They do say, and this is like just the wormy... I can't imagine the wordsmithing that would have gone on at the floor of National Cabinet for this one, but, quote, consideration of the phased introduction of inclusionary zoning and planning to support permanent, affordable, social and specialist housing in ways that do not add to construction costs. So the already implicit in this weak idea to maybe consider potentially phasing something in at some point is that inclusionary zoning, i.e. mandating a requirement for a certain proportion of new developments to be social and or affordable housing, that will add to construction costs. And that is a consideration that needs to be front of mind when you're looking at increasing the supply of social housing, is how much is it going to cost the developers that we're maybe forcing to include public housing in their giant new fucking high rise?
Yeah, I think read that as that do not minimize construction profits would be a more accurate reading of exactly how that works. I mean, specialist housing, do they mean like more housings that are more like accessible for people with disabilities? Because that will add to construction costs, and it fucking should.
Well, and it should. Yeah, do not add to. That's right. It's like you've literally just cancelled out what you've just said. So you're fucking cowards, and I hate you all. Speaking of, don't worry though, we've got a better deal for renters.
Great, thank God.
Labor says. So number one, they've got a bunch of things that they're putting under this better deal for renters package that the states and territories have agreed to at National Cabinet. First one, ending no grounds evictions. Now, Tom, there is a bit of there is a semantic disagreement around what no grounds evictions are. What do you think a no grounds eviction is?
A no grounds eviction is a landlord evicting you and either not giving a reason or for any reason that they like whatsoever, that is not considered reasonable by any stretch of the imagination. So a reasonable eviction would be that landlord moving back into that property, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
But under the law, under the way it's certainly sort of set up. That's my understanding of no grounds eviction. And when we have laws banning that, it says that if landlords want to evict tenants, they have to give a clear reason that meets the reasonable test.
And so do you think that it is reasonable for the landlord to not renew your lease, therefore evicting you, even though you haven't, nothing wrong has happened, they just don't want to renew the lease, it's ended?
No.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think that's reasonable. Well, no, because then that would just, okay, right. So that's an example.
This is the distinction. Yeah.
Your lease comes to an end and then they say, bye-bye, I want to charge someone else more money.
Yes, what happens to most of us, right?
Jesus Christ.
So, that, and yes, this is the other thing. In there, they talk about, I think there's something about strengthening your ability to appeal a retaliatory eviction, because I believe in all states and territories, or at least in most, certainly in Queensland, it is technically illegal to evict someone, including by not renewing their lease because they annoyed you by asking for too many repairs or whatever.
Yes.
But everyone fucking knows that's what happens. Everyone knows.
Yes.
You ask for the shower to get fixed, suddenly you don't get your lease renewed. And you're like, oh, That's so interesting. I thought that was illegal.
Yes.
But yeah, that's obviously what's going to happen when you don't end no grounds evictions. For many, many years, as I understand it, advocates for better rental rights and people in the housing space would speak about ending no grounds evictions to mean that you have a right to stay in your home unless, you do something wrong, or the owner needs to live there or needs to renovate, it's not suitable to live there, things like that. Not and that you have basically a long-term right, to stay in your home. But how it's now being interpreted so that Labor can say, yes, advocacy groups, we have ended no grounds evictions. And this is exactly what happened in Queensland. They're like, yep, we're ending no grounds evictions. And media continue to fucking report that Queensland Labor ended no grounds evictions when they didn't. But they're like, okay, no, instead of having no grounds as something that's listed in the Act as a way that you can issue a notice to leave for, we now have a list of grounds under which you can issue a notice to leave. One of them is the lease ended. So they just renamed it in the Act. And they're like, we did it. You're welcome.
Oh, my God.
Queensland did that. They say that you can end the lease at the end of any fixed term. They ended no grounds evictions for periodic leases. Victoria similarly ended no grounds evictions for periodic leases. Apparently, you guys can only end it, though, at the end of the first fixed term. As a no grounds, basically, and then after that you can't, which is interesting.
Okay.
But that's a recent change, and it's kind of unclear yet what impact that is actually happening.
Well, it's driving landlords out of the market. I mean, all these rental reforms in Victoria.
Yeah, well, that's why the housing
just
crisis
fighting it too fucking hard.
Yeah, well, I guess we should take that as a word of warning. The ACT banned no grounds evictions. ACT, our rental regulations kings, it seems. And various other states and territories are already looking at this. Like Tasmania has already said that we're going to do something like either the Queensland or the Victorian model. South Australia, WA and New South Wales, though, you can end the lease at the end of any periodic or fixed term. New South Wales is removing it for periodic leases. SA has said they might do something close to the ACT, and WA is like not looking at it yet.
When we say periodic, do you mean like month to month?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
No worries. And just a reminder that I think something like 94% of all leases in Australia are a year or less. Again, we do not have long-term leases in this country. So, yes, you're always looking, literally year to year about having a safe and secure and affordable place to rent. That's what you're looking at.
It's a classic. Like, I think I've spoken about how, I feel as though it's a very fundamental part of my political identity or experience, the fact that I rented, my family home was rented for so long, and having to leave that home when I was 13 was really pivotal and quite devastating for me. I didn't even remember until recently that my first door knock was with Amy McMahon's campaign in South Brisbane in 2017. And that it was a specific renters' rights one, and we were going around and talking to people. And I literally even remember we knocked on someone's door who was packing up because they were like, oh, yeah, we're getting kicked out, didn't get our lease renewed. But for me, I was like, wait, there are countries or there are jurisdictions where I can't just get kicked out for no reason? Holy shit, that would be so transformative. That would change my life so radically to know that I just have that security that if I'm paying rent, if I'm paying your fucking mortgage, I'm not doing anything wrong, I can stay in my home unless, you need it. And yes, and I think I was reflecting on this. I posted on Twitter that, that was 6 years ago or less. And no one really, myself included, thought of renting as a political issue. I didn't think of, renters as a political class, so as something that could be improved through political action. And I was astounded that the Greens were taking on something like this. And that was true up until quite recently. But every single day now there's a story about renters' rights. It's on National Cabinet agenda. It is the major parties' feet are to the flames of the demands for better renters' rights, which is, even though all this shit is so depressing in general, that is kind of extraordinary. It is a little thing to celebrate, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that's, first of all, material conditions, the worsening rental crisis and the housing crisis getting worse over the past couple of years is certainly a factor there, but a true testament to, the Greens' political work, renters' rights organisations, and people like Max Chandler They're out there politicising the material conditions of renters and saying this is not good enough. And what you're up against there is the fucking Australian mindset of, the Australian dream, remember, is just to be a homeowner, and a house is their castle. And if you live in the property that I own, I'm doing you a favor. I'm doing you a solid. It's not yours. You're constantly on watch. You are on a lease. You owe me money. I am the landed gentry. And you should be lucky and grateful for having a roof over your head provided to you by me as you help me pay my mortgage. It's so strong in the Australian psyche, and you see what happens when people push back against it and say this is actually unfair and fucked up and terrible. The landed gentry of Australia lose their fucking minds.
Almost this imagining of renters as homeless, as though the home that I live in is not really my home because it's someone else's home. And that, I think, is what
you failed. You failed at the Australian dream. So you're actually a loser, and so you're being somewhat punished. And how dare you assert any kind of rights over my property while you're renting it from me?
Yeah. And, that when we talk about long-term leases and like lease security and ending no grounds evictions, even though it can be a bit more complicated, it's not like as flashy as a rent freeze, it so fundamentally gets that issue of this being someone's home that they live in.
Yes.
Like similarly, these standards that, or this agreement that Labor has come out with through National Cabinet doesn't mention anything about minor modifications, which I think is, again, goes to that fundamental issue of being able to put down roots in your home as a renter and treat it like your home. Treat it with respect, but I should be able to hang a fucking picture on the fucking wall. I should be able to plant a garden if I can, if there's space, just basic things like that. That's not even mentioned in this. And like that, I think, minor modifications is something that we still need to continue pushing for. But there are many things to push for, including basic minimum standards that in this agreement, what they've said is, quote, they will phase in minimum quality standards for rental properties. Sounds great, you think. They say, for example, stovetop in good working order, hot and cold running water. Reach for the stars. Reach for the stars. Hot and cold running water, guys. Renters, they really get it too fucking easy. I tell you what, all these pro-renter reforms that are coming through, no wonder landlords are fleeing the market, having to provide hot and cold running water to get paid $500 a week in rent for a one-bedroom property. Yeah.
But I'm just a poor mum and dad investor. How am I supposed to provide both hot and cold water to me little tenants?
First they wanted cold, then they wanted hot. What next? Greedy fucking bastards. So it sounds as though, based on this, it's really not improving current standards in any meaningful way because they're already in place a requirement that, rental properties be habitable, which arguably you would think includes things like hot and cold running water or a working stovetop. It's just being more explicit about what that means. Apparently that's similar to what New South Wales has done recently, where they have set out standards quite highly specifically in their regulation, their tenancy laws. It doesn't include things that it should, like, energy efficiency or accessibility, disability standards, minimum standards like that. And also I should say, shout out to Joel from Better Renting, who helped me get my head around a lot of this stuff today and what was announced and what is in place across the country, because I'm only Queensland brained and didn't know all the rest of the country. But as Joel informed me, Victoria and the ACT are the only ones right now who have any minimum energy efficiency standards for rentals, which is such a basic. And even so, Victoria's seem pretty shit. It's you can have a 2-star energy rated fixed heater in the main living room that maybe helped some people to upgrade, but not for others. So that's the minimum standard stuff. The headline though, rent caps. Tom, do you hear?
What?
That's
what the
right.
Hell? Oh my God, this is huge.
Oh my God,
great.
Insane.
You sort of build up some stuff before and I got a little bit disappointed with the reality, but I'm sure this time around everything's going to be good.
I saved something good for you. I did. Rent caps, well, that is a national standard of no more than one rent increase per year for a tenant in the same property across fixed and ongoing agreements. That's the quote from the National Cabinet release. Limiting the frequency by which your rent can go up by an unlimited amount. Tom, are you happy?
Okay.
Well, doesn't affect you, but
does it? Well, it means I can only jack up my tenant's rent once a year. This is an outrage.
Frustrating, right? But you can jack it up by whatever you want. So
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, don't worry, it's okay.
Wait till I tell my wife about this.
I think
She'll be so
saying,
pleased.
So, I mean, talk me through your journey on this, because I remember maybe last week or early in the week you were like, what about the thing of, limiting the frequency of rent increases? Is that a win? And I was like, it's absolutely not a win in any way.
Well, look, would you say that, okay, so the idea that you can only raise rent once a year. Now, in no way am I suggesting that there are not landlords who will jack up rents insane amounts of money and kick people out. I suppose by limiting the frequency of the rent increases, you could argue that it would in some way limit the amount by which that rent could go up, because a sudden increase by a huge amount would result in a tenant being unable to pay and having to move out, if you know what I mean. So I'm just saying there are.
I think they would care.
Well, I know, and I guess the market is such a fucking landlord's market at the moment. They probably could jack up the rent so much that they could kick anyone out and get almost anybody in to replace them. So actually cancel what I just said. It's a fucking shit show. But do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there are some in landlords theory, who consider the basic pay of how much the tenants can afford for rent and do increase their rent in line of those market rates relative to people's incomes. Okay, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing.
Like, they'll increase it relative to market rents, which will mean it'll just keep going up at the same insane rate. And we've seen, so there already are in almost every jurisdiction, this already exists, a 12-monthly limit on the number of times you can increase the rent. In fact, it's only WA and the NT that have the 6-monthly limit. You can increase the rent every 6 months. Queensland, that was the case until recently, when they, similar to this, were like, we're doing something about rent increases. We're limiting them to once a year. And what concerns me, though, specifically about the wording of this, where it says 1 rent increase per year for a tenant in the same property across fixed and ongoing agreements. That implies to me that you can end a 6-month lease and raise the rent if you kick the tenant out, which is the loophole that was left in place in Queensland, which incentivizes shorter leases, first of all, but also incentivizes a landlord to kick out the tenant where they may not otherwise have, because then they can get a new tenant in and jack up the rent every 6 months rather than every year.
Right. You can start a new lease with an increased rent.
Yeah. And that doesn't, like, the fact that this refers to a tenant rather than tying it to the property, which is the obvious solution that people have said would reduce that happening, that is extremely concerning. And we have already, literally, I think I've said before, within pretty much immediately after they introduced this in Queensland, which the Greens warned this is what would happen, tenants were being like, oh yeah, my landlord is going to kick me out because of this. And And so you'd think that would normally work. A landlord would say, I'm going to increase the rent by this much. The tenant says, I cannot afford that. And then the landlord says, very well, your lease is not getting renewed. I'm going to find a new tenant with a new lease at that higher rent rate. And that's going to work out for me. Well, it's more that they would just issue them a notice to leave. They would say, your lease is up. You have to leave, so that they can raise the rent.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they already knew that tenant could not afford to pay the increased rent.
Well, no, because they couldn't increase the rent if they kept the tenant in the property, because without the change of tenant, they have to wait 12 months before they can raise the rent. Yeah. It's a little bit complicated, but basically, it incentivizes them kind of kicking people out after 6 months. So if they do that, that'll just be even more fucked, and more people will be, kicked out of their homes. So you fuckwits. Meanwhile, so Victoria is just trying to be even more, we're trying to do the right thing, proposed every 2 years, which is kind of like, why? If the rest of the country isn't doing it, I mean, there is an argument that it should be nationally consistent across the country, that you can only raise the rent every year. That makes sense. It should also be limited, the amount by which you can raise the rent, obviously. I saw, the first coverage I saw of this was in The Guardian. I think that maybe Labor dropped it to The Guardian as a scoop, and so I read the article the morning of the National Cabinet meeting, and fucking Paul Carp, or whoever it was like, the Greens have been saying that they would be willing to negotiate, instead of a rent freeze, just to end unlimited rent increases. So maybe they will be open to this and will support the half. And I was like, is that so? That's so fucking presumptuous and like disingenuous as well. Like, if you just took a second to be like, does this actually go in any way to what the Greens have been asking for, which is an end to unlimited rent increases? Like, as you know, unlimited rent increases every year are unlimited rent increases. And the idea that this is Labor negotiating in good faith and the Greens should stop being petulant and be like, yeah, this meets our demands, I think is ridiculous.
I saw, Julie Collins, Housing Minister, being interviewed on 7:30, and she was just like, strengthening renters' rights, and we're just making sure that all landlords and tenants have a good idea of their rights and responsibilities in this relationship, and all the blah, 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 blah. And just no acknowledgement of the fact that the rent is too damn high, goddammit, and it's going to get higher and higher.
Yep. It sure is. It sure is. A few little scraps just to round up what else was in that agreement at National Cabinet. We've spoken about this on the show before. Banning soliciting rent bidding. Not banning rent bidding, just banning soliciting it. So you can still take it. And because the housing market is so absolutely cooked and people who can pay are going to pay whatever the fuck they can to get into a home, really doesn't matter. They are making it easier, or saying that states and territories should make it easier to get out of your lease, to end your lease if you are subject to domestic and family violence. That's good. Lots of states and territories already doing that. Limiting lease break fees, also good. Again, lots of states and territories already doing it. One cool thing is limiting the, providing a prescribed application form for tenancies, effectively to limit the things that an agent or a landlord can ask you for. And a lot of it is around protecting and destroying, simultaneously protecting and destroying, but renters or an applicant's information. I don't know if you've have you heard any kind of stories about weird shit that renters have to provide to apply these days? They're tell us, your last 3 meals and what you
personal
took
references
in high school,
your religion,
and all that.
Yeah, Jesus, yeah, totally. Yeah, people do Google searches, and there are these renters blacklists as well that do the rounds when, basically bad tenants as determined by one landlord is then effectively blacklisted from getting other accommodation, and landlords and rental agents share those lists.
Yeah, exactly. And yet there's no agent, there's no landlord blacklist. This was, I really liked this thread on Twitter from Bension Siebert, who said, the real estate agency wants 5 years of my residential and employment history plus character references, which in my case means gathering details for and contacting 12 people and uploading more than 24 ID, rental and financial documents to apply. They go on, these people know the make, model and registration of my car. Why? Meanwhile, I don't know my landlord's name. Does this person have a long history of ignoring maintenance requests, dramatic rent rises, turning up at the property unannounced, evicting tenants for no reason? Nothing. And when I finally get to the end of this fast and free, quote, application, having already spent hours giving up more detailed information about my life than my employer knows about me, would I like to, quote, show I'm a great tenant by paying for my own background check? Which is why, repeatedly, I think the Greens have called for a landlord blacklist. If there's going to be a renters blacklist, there should be a landlord blacklist. Anyway, the final thing that this agreement said that they would, quote, consider options for better regulation of short stay residential accommodation, as if they just realized that Airbnb is a thing that maybe they should fucking do something about.
What do you think about that, Dee Madigan? Are you on board? Do you think your clients should be blacklisted?
Yeah.
Let us know.
Is that Dee Madigan endorsed? Who can say? Maybe we'll find out how endorsed all of this is after the national conference, ALP national conference, is happening. Maybe as you're listening to this, dear listener, or maybe it's just happened. I think a lot of it is probably on the Friday and the Saturday this week. There are so many rallies. It's so funny. There's there's rallies every day. On Saturday, it reads, I was putting them all together and my friend said this is like a set list for the gig of the Labor National Conference. And wouldn't you know it, the rally for renters and public housing is headlining at 11 a.m. I think that, we've already seen the CFMEU show out in force to push for a super profits tax to fund more public housing. I imagine, will be coming back next week and talking about what comes out of the National Conference and the HAF negotiations as they continue.
Yeah, I mean, and we should say the Greens came out pretty hard against these announcements. Adam Bandt says there's nothing here for renters. Max said that the Labor Party has spat in the face of the nation's renters, which is pretty accurate. So, I just think it was really good to go through all that, and thank you for putting that together, Emerald, because over the next between now and when the HAF is reintroduced to the Parliament in October, Labor is going to point to this agreement as like, we've done it. Okay, this is the renters' rights. This is as good as you can get. We've negotiated in good faith, and you should know that that is bullshit, and this is not anywhere near close to the kind of wins for renters' rights to change the state of renters in this country that the Greens are fighting for. Hence, the party will keep fighting for something better because we deserve it and this country can deliver it.
Yeah, I think we will.
That feeling and that, like, we're winners no matter what is down to the fans. Like, they have created that. They have made us feel like, you know, we have done something amazing for them. And I've just, you know, walked down the street just with Macca just before, and everyone was just saying thank you. Not, you know, well done that they normally do, or great goal, just thank you. And me and Macca were literally, we got in the cab on the way home, we were laughing. Everyone was just coming around us in the middle of Queen Street Mall, and like, we kind of just were like, wow, that was amazing. And I think what we've done for them and what they've done for us has just been amazing. We talked about this before the World Cup, that we want to leave a legacy and have this moment talked about for 10, 20 years. And I think we have already done that. But to win a bronze medal and bring, you know, a World Cup medal to this country would be, you know, amazing. But it really feels like we have brought the nation together over football, which, you know, some people might have said we were crazy if we had said this was going to happen a year ago. So it is an amazing feeling, but there is definitely work still to be done.
All right, football.
Quickly, let's do a sports podcast.
We have to. We're sports podcasters. We were US politics podcasters. Now we're sports podcasters.
Me, I bloody love sports ball.
No.
Were you gripped by Matildas fever, Emerald? Did you watch the game? Were you into it?
Yes, I'm like a really reluctant, stubborn, anti-late adopter. When everyone's really into something, I'm like, I won't do it. Like, I won't watch Game of Thrones or whatever. But I did accidentally, because my friend was streaming it on their phone, catch the last, like the penalty, whatever they call it, shootout thing with France and the Matildas.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely hooked and screaming in public. And so I watched the England versus Australia game this week.
I'm pretty, like, I'm not a big sports guy, as people know, but I do love the big events shit. So if it's State of Origin, if it's the AFL Grand Final, if it's like literally, millions of people tuning in for a World Cup, I do go kind of on board and do go. Yeah, it is pretty cool. And I'm in Edinburgh in Scotland, and of course the match was about 11 a.m. over here, and there was just a beer garden filled with lots of Australians, a few English people, and lots of Scottish people who were barracking for the Australians because they wanted the English to lose. And it was amazing. When Sam Kerr kicked that goal, every Australian leapt to their feet, and it was fucking awesome. People lost their minds.
Yeah. There's that video, I can't remember where it was, but just of an aerial shot of a crowd just leaping up and screaming when that happened. It's pretty incredible.
And pretty extraordinary generally for the level of investment and public goodwill around a women's sporting match, which was kind of, quite cool to see, I suppose. Of course, it was sad that we lost. We did not win. And England is going to play Spain in the final of the World Cup this weekend. We will still play for the bronze medal. We play against Sweden on Friday night for the bronze. So go Tildas for that. Shout out to Barnaby for watching the wrong game of the Matildas on the television. That was pretty fucking amazing.
Yeah.
It's great. All the politicians were getting in on the fund. You see Richard Marles resigned as Defence Minister and handed over to Mackenzie, which I don't know. To me, I was a bit like, oh, this is when it does become borderline propaganda in kind of like nationalism easy, and the politicians can get all this sweet credit.
I like. Yeah, yes. Fuck off. And as if they like you. They're the woke Matildas.
You think they're on board with AUKUS, you fuckhead?
Yeah.
Of course, the reason we lost the game is because Anthony Albanese jinxed us with his false promises of a public holiday. Did you follow the public holiday discourse this idea. It was thrown around. He was in an interview back in June. He was asked, hey, if Matildas win the whole World Cup, then surely Australia will get a public holiday. He says, that seems like a pretty good idea. A lot of talk about it. We're getting closer. Of course, if we, won this game, we would have gone through to the final. And then eventually, head of National Cabinet at the Albanese, he says, we're not going to discuss it, or it's all a matter for the states and territories.
Just a fun,
and didn't happen.
Fucking, what a dog. I mean, what do you think about the take? I see some people saying, it's anti-poverty or it's pro whatever, to call for a public holiday when you're in a cushy, permanent position at work because casuals can't plan for the loss of income from a new public holiday. And I'm like, I don't know, public holidays are generally good. And like, you should get protection and better wages. And also have a public holiday. You know what I mean?
Get better protection and wages, bitch. Then come back to me.
Yeah. When you do it, like, yes, obviously, like, I'm sorry, cozzie lives are really bad. We're working on that as well, but we would also like new public holidays.
Well, look, we should not have a public holiday based on the success of a sporting team. We shouldn't have a one-off public holiday based on whether or not our sporting team is victorious in a sporting match. We should have public holidays because we work too much. And working people need a break, and we should reduce the amount of work we have in our lives. We should have a 4-day work week for the same reason. But I mean, this was what was so maddening about this debate all this week was the idea that it's a little treat for the people of Australia that a sports team wins. I mean, it's one thing for the classic Bob Hawke quote to be like,
I tell you what, any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up to die is a bum.
Awesome, rock and roll based. We love it. But that's different. Skipping work is different to a government-endorsed public holiday.
Yeah. I mean, did you know that the Queensland Greens did a big public holiday push in 2017? It was one of the it was one of our biggest announcements, I believe. This was kind of pre my time, but sent people absolutely nuts, along with $1 fares, public transport fares.
Amazing.
Well, we proposed 4. We said we want 4 new public holidays a year. I think one of them would be like a First Nations Day of recognition of some sort, maybe NAIDOC. Something would be about national parks or something. There's another one that I can't remember. And one was State of Origin Day. So I assume game 3 or one of the games, it would be a public holiday, which absolutely it should be. Why the fuck not?
Why not? Well, we have one off for fucking Melbourne Cup Day. We have one off for the ahead of the AFL Grand Final in Victoria now.
Yeah, you guys do in Victoria, yeah.
Yeah, Jesus
Yeah, if
Christ.
we have the fucking Melbourne Cup, we can have a day off for State of Origin. But everyone got – and I will say, at the time, I went and looked at this announcement and I can see that Labor said something like, Cameron Dick said – I'm not sure it's something Queenslanders are looking for. I've not heard people talking about the need for more public holidays. I'm not sure it's something Queenslanders will want. LNP leader, well, I guess the LNP is on brand, still hating public holidays. Peter Dutton was very anti-public holiday. He said more loopy policies from a loopy party that's not going to deliver any economic benefit. Because, the small businesses and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, the business. And these fucking cucks. Tasmanian Premier, sole Liberal leader of the National Cabinet, Jerry Rockcliffe, poured cold water on the idea. We're 100% behind the Matildas, but we won't supporting a public holiday. Our small businesses are often the first to sponsor and support our grassroots and elite sports. It's too much to expect them to shoulder this cost too. His own daughters were quick to roast him at a family chat. Dad, WTF, one wrote, while Ruby added, no, Dad, we need another holiday. Rockcliffe shared that ribbing on Facebook. Safe to say I'm not the most popular member of the Rockcliffe family this morning. What the fuck is wrong with you? Your daughters think you're a cunt.
Posting their
Why
L's.
are you sharing
What
this
are you
on
doing?
Facebook?
What a fucking idiot.
Palaszczuk is adopting a let's see how we go approach. I love the idea of the public holiday, but let's get them there in the first place. I don't want to jinx anything. So again, just the idea that you're the leader of a state and, the team didn't win, therefore we won't have a day off. What the fuck's wrong with you?
Palaszczuk said she was commissioning a review into whether we should have a new public holiday.
Oy, oy, oy. Do you think this is a watershed moment for women's sport more broadly? I mean, 75,000 people were in the stadium watching the game. It was the highest rating thing on Australian TV across the board all year. And there was, as we mentioned, this remarkable sense of national unity with all the skepticisms and how much of that illusion that could be. If us coming together as a nation to feel about something is anything, if that's something that can happen, you would have to say that it certainly happened around this match. And it happened around the match of in women's football, which is a remarkable thing to have happen, I suppose, based on the history of the male domination of sport in this country. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, I think, and it's certainly true that, you know, women's sport is just completely, underpaid, underrated, underpromoted, undervalued. The idea that, it's people are not as interested in women's sport, that it's not as impressive. And certainly I think this has kind of blown that out of the water. It's very difficult to make that argument anymore when far more people, more people have watched a women's football game than watched Origin or something like that. That's what I watch. But yeah.
I agree with you. I'll tell you what I hate, though, is like people saying, yes, now you can pay the Matildas the same because they had to prove themselves in the market or whatever.
Well,
so back in the day, they say, oh, you don't pay people the same because they don't attract the same audiences.
Yeah.
So now they have it. So now every women's sport, I guess, has to meet this same fucking test, has to capture the nation's imagination and compete with literally centuries of male-dominated sport and attention and focus and money and funding. Okay, so every single women's sport has to compete in the markets of sports attention in order to be paid fairly for their work and their labour, which is bullshit.
Well, that's the thing, I think, and it is like it's a labour rights issue. And I know there was, I think, an article by Mick Clune in Jacobin about, I guess, you know, a socialist perspective on the rise of the Matildas. And I think it concludes with like this was before the game this week, but it was like whoever wins will then play against Spain, and you should support Spain. Because the players went on strike against their coach or something, and so they're the socialist choice. But he said the Matildas' success hasn't been guaranteed. They are national heroes, and they're heroes that understand that workers need to stand strong together against discrimination and exploitation at the hands of their bosses. The Matildas are strikers on and off the field and outspoken opponents of sexism. They're the antithesis of the machismo and conservatism that has plagued Australian sports, and with every victory they challenge another establishment prejudice. It's truly kind of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Intersectional. Yeah, right. Like intersectional, you know, solidarity. And it is remarkable to have such popular support for a team that has made no secret of the fact that they are incredibly progressive, right?
Yes. Pro-union, strong First Nation solidarity. The team is full of out and proud queer women, including Sam Kerr, the national hero, and Mackenzie Arnold, the goalkeeper as well. Like, yeah, pretty fucking awesome. Of course, this has led to the ire of fuckheads on Twitter, like this Kobe Thatcher person who have no idea who this is at all. But this was the person, when they won the match against France, you know, their tweet, I hope the woke Matildas lose tonight's game. That tweet was getting posted being like, fuck you, the Matildas rule, we won in your face. And then, of course, Kobe was very happy with herself. Once the Matildas lost, she tweeted, see you later, Matildas. Take your Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags with you. One country, one flag, one woke losing Australian women's national soccer team. What a cunt.
What a fucking loser. I mean, and so out of tune with like what the broader public, the mood is. Yes. And I saw someone as well, I think, saying, you know, now would be the perfect time for Albanese to push for a referendum or push for a republic when everyone's like, fuck England, fuck the monarchy, fuck the king. Yeah. We should do it now. But absolutely, I mean, God, the English suck, don't they?
Great example there of the anti-woke crowd being completely out of step with the vast majority of people. Okay, I think we could agree there are some elements of wokeism, whatever the fuck that means, of PC culture that is not entirely connected with the vast majority of people. Sure, that's the ongoing fight to liberate everybody. But holy shit, if you want your finger further off the pulse from the anti-woke crowd, that shit on the Matildas right now.
Anti-Matildas. Yeah. Fucking losers. No, we love the Tillies. I think they're fucking, Makes me wish, you know, I played soccer when I was a little girl, very, very briefly. Could have been me. Who knows if I'd just stuck with it.
Halfback passes to the center. Back to the wing. Back to the center. Center holds it. Holds it. Holds it.
Halfback. Passes to centre. Back to wing. Back to centre. Centre holds it. Holds it. Holds it.
All right, call to action. Oh, yeah, there was some other news this week. Some guy's running for the mayor of Brisbane. What the hell?
Some guy, Jonno Sriranganathan, one of the most radical politicians, probably the most radical politician in the country. Maybe the big socialists can come for me, I don't care. And two-time Serious Danger guest announced on Wednesday, also unfortunately the day that National Cabinet met and announced a bunch of shit, that he is running for Lord Mayor of Brisbane. I still think it's quite funny that they say Lord Mayor, but Lord Mayor, which would mean that he would replace the most powerful LNP figure on the mainland because, as we've said, Brisbane City Council is basically pretty much the size of like a state government. It's enormous, massive budget, and yeah, biggest government still in power on the mainland. If you want to support Jonno's campaign, because I think it will be fucking interesting and cool. He is, you can have a look. We'll put the link to his candidacy statement announcement in our show note, but you can go back and listen to some of the interviews we've done with him. He has an incredible record that makes him just like catnip for the LNP to get mad about. You know, he has spoken about, hey, if there are empty homes in your neighborhood, maybe you could like stay there if you need to. They're like, he supports squatting, he supports trespassing. He has been wrongfully arrested by police for being involved in protests supporting refugees. He, is a staunch critic of racism in the police. He's just a sick cunt. If you are in Brisbane, me and Jen, you should volunteer for his campaign. We'll put the link in the show notes. If you're not and you have a bit of spare cash and could throw it his way, I know that campaign, I think, gets like zero starting money. Like he really doesn't have any money to do anything. And I think if anyone could do some cool shit with a little bit of cash and, some money to pay volunteers, well, to pay staff to run a big campaign, it will be Jonno. So we'll put the donate link in the show notes too.
Also, shout out to Better Renting. Everyone mentioned that they helped us put together some thinking and some facts for this week's episode. They do great work. They came out really strong, saying that this is not good enough at all. They care about renters just like the Greens. betterrenting.org.au. Sign up for their updates to be involved in surveys and actions and their general advocacy for renters' rights across the country. betterrenting.org.au.
And seriousdangerpod.com. That's the website where you can find our things. You can support the show by signing up to Patreon. It's just $3 a month and you get access to premium subscriber-only content, a bunch of cool interviews, Tom's interview with Lee Rhiannon. We have some cool stuff coming up on that podcast, on the Patreon, and you get access to it all the back catalogue through. You get instructions to add it to your podcast app so you don't have to go and listen to it on Patreon as well when you subscribe, and it helps us keep the show running. If you can't do that, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening now. Leave us a 5-star review. Go follow us on @SeriousDangerAU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Send us an email if you want, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. But apart from that, we can go bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Serious Danger Australia.